Welcome to Keep the Game Beautiful podcast. Each week, I highlight incredible people who are doing amazing things in soccer, the beautiful game. I'm Anna Turi, your host. Thank you for listening. This past weekend, I was able to help coach my brother's team to 2 wins in their AYSO league. I found myself getting more and more comfortable each game with my coaching style, and I really enjoyed my time. I also had an opportunity to officiate, both as a center and as an AR. And I'm really appreciative of that a mentor came out to give me some pointers. It was a cold, rainy day with temperatures in the 50s, but my Duke TIG XS still held up through the weather. I'm excited for today's guest. She is a true legend in coaching, not only for winning games, but also for developing people. She has also invested significantly into other coaches through programs like What Drives Winning and speaking at the Wisconsin Women's Soccer event and just being accessible to coaches for questions or doing podcast interviews like this one. Something else I really appreciate is she is very funny. At convention last year, she wouldn't see me eating Frosted Flakes. She just belted out in her Tony Tiger voice. They are great. I really hope you were able to learn a little bit more about her style and the ways she keeps the game beautiful. Enjoy the episode. Today I'm joined by the head coach of women's soccer at University of Florida, Becky Burleigh. She has been in this role for over 25 years and has coached soccer for over 30 years. Her Gators have won a national championship and the conference championship 13 times. She also played soccer in her youth and through her college years. I got to visit with her a little bit at the United Soccer Coaches Convention. I could tell how much fun she has with soccer and just fun in general. So, Becky, could you share a little bit more about your journey and what brought you to where you are today?
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. I think my journey was kind of unique in the sense that it was a little bit of a different era. But I knew I wanted to coach when I got to college, and I saw my first full-time coach because all my coaches prior to that were just, someone's mom or dad that did it part-time. And so when I got to college, I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I'm not sure my parents thought that was like a real career. So I had to sort of convince them that's what I wanted to do. So I graduated in May, took a head coaching job at Berry College in Rome, Georgia in June. And they were a really good team, so I was really fortunate to step into a good spot right from the beginning. I was there for 5 years, and then Florida opened. There was a bunch of programs opening all at once at that time, and I felt like Florida, I knew how successful all of their athletic programs would be, so I felt like they would be very good very quickly, and was really eager to interview for that job and was fortunate to get it.
On this podcast, I always start with the same 3 questions. So first, what does the beautiful game mean to you?
I think the fact that soccer is such a player's game and not a coach's game, I think that's what makes it really unique. No one's telling a player what to do every second of the game. It's very free-flowing. You have to make a lot of decisions. And I love that about our game because I think it attracts the type of person who wants to be an independent thinker and wants to be able to display creativity along with discipline. And that's kind of what makes it very unique.
What are actions or things you do to keep the game beautiful?
I think the biggest thing for me is probably to remind ourselves, like our players and our team, and we're competing with people and not necessarily against them. I think that good teams bring out the best in each other and good players bring out the best in each other, and how to keep that from turning into like a rivalry.
How do you encourage others to keep the game beautiful?
That's tough. I don't know that you can really influence people outside of your circle, but I think I would just say that trying to show positive examples of things that happen within our game to other people and highlighting positive examples as opposed to, pointing out the negative things that occur.
So you had kind of talked about your coaching journey, but how did you first fall in love with soccer?
That's pretty easy. I I moved from Massachusetts to Florida when I was 10 years old. And prior to that, I had never played an organized sport. I lived in a pretty rural area and they just didn't have them. And so I moved right across the street from a soccer field just randomly. And my parents thought it would be a good way for us to meet new kids and to get involved with the community. And it was so convenient because, I could literally walk across the street and be at the field all day. And my parents didn't have to worry about where I was or what I was doing. And that just gave me like a freedom that I had never had before. And then to have a team where I lived in Massachusetts, there weren't even really a lot of kids around us. So like having a team was an amazing experience for me.
When I was about 10 years old, I also moved to Iowa, and that's how I started this sport.
Oh.
How did soccer help you settle into your new home?
Oh, it was huge. Right away I met, 15 girls my age and had something in common. And, it was an amazing experience when you've never been on a team before and then you get to join a team. I don't know, like that's just such a unique experience. I had seen my oldest brother played baseball when we lived in Massachusetts, but that was about it. And I felt like a little bit of an outsider to that because there were no teams for girls in my area. So that was I just fell in love immediately.
Do you have any memories from playing those first few years?
Well, our team was sponsored by a marina because we lived near the water, and they had several teams in this league. And our team was the youngest team that they had, and I think one of the only girls' teams. And so our team name was the Dinghies, which is a small boat, and so I'm not sure we struck fear into the hearts of a lot of people with our team name. But, that team was really iconic because we all grew up in the same community. We stayed together as a team until the end of high school. And I think it was just a unique experience compared to today's players where, clubs change often. That did not happen in my community.
At that age, we see players that are ready to quit. How can the coaches keep it fun and interesting for a younger player?
Well, I think, again, like that kind of comes down to what kind of experience is the player having. And if the player is having a good experience, they're unlikely to quit. But if it's not fun, if it's all about sort of the dark side of sports and not the, amazing side of sports, I can see why somebody would want to quit at that time. So I think it was really the coach's responsibility to try and make things as enjoyable as possible for that age.
I know you talked about how soccer or sports can just really be an escape for people. Recently, we had a 140-mile-per-hour winds, or basically a Category 4 in Iowa, and I was able to coach a goalkeeper camp. How have you seen the sports help people recover from a disaster or trauma?
I think one thing about sports is it brings people together. And I think when you bring people together, you can do pretty amazing things, whether that's help a community recover, whether that's help an individual work through a hard time. I think that's one of the beauties of it is just that genuine care for one another and care for your community. I mean, I know when I played on that team in Tarpon Springs, Florida, like we really took a lot of pride because we were a small town and we would play like teams from Miami or Orlando, and like we just kind of saw ourselves as this little underdog. And I think it gave our community like a little bit of an identity.
How does a soccer family or team help lift each other during difficult times?
Well, we've seen that firsthand. We had one of our players' dads had COVID, and it was pretty amazing to see the support that was rallied around him and his family during that time. And, I think that the player on our team, the daughter of him, just felt like she was going to be able to get through it because she had people, praying for her, surrounding her, asking if they could help. And I don't know if they would have made it through that time as well as they did without that support.
When did you really start to see soccer as not more than just a game, but something that moves people and a team sport?
I think I was really lucky because I think I felt that very early because I saw how it affected me personally coming from such a, small rural community in Massachusetts. And I just saw how it was like a uniter, and it allowed you to have something in common with people that you may have nothing else in common with. And sometimes sports is a challenge because you're trying to bring a very diverse group of people together. but that's also the beauty of it, is like it's a meritocracy, you know, like when you do well, you are rewarded for that. And I think that in itself sort of brings to light like why sports is kind of a field where, you know, really like how you perform as a teammate and how you perform as a team is really important. And one is not really more important than the other, because it's not just about, you know, your ability to do something on your own. It's your ability to do something together with someone.
So how does energy and passion drive a team?
Well, it's huge. I think a team without energy and passion is just kind of going through the motions. And, you know, it's hard sometimes because a season could get long or you could face some adversity. But that's when playing on a team sport is what makes it so amazing, is that you have your teammates to rely on. And I think, you know, being willing to ask for help on those times when you aren't at your best. You know, if you're playing an individual sport, you really can't do that. And so I think it's pretty cool to have a team sport to where you can rely on your teammates when you need it the most.
You had kind of mentioned asking for help. How can we encourage players to ask for help? Maybe their pride they may not be willing to ask for help, or what can we do about that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, I think it's like taking away the stigma of asking for help, making sure people realize that we're all going to have bad days, and maybe I'm helping you today, but you're helping me tomorrow. And I think it's really comes down to the environment, making that okay.
And this can also help with trust too. How can a team build their culture and deeper their trust?
Yeah, trust is huge in the game of soccer because, you know, there's one ball and 11 people. And when you don't have the ball, like what you do really matters. And I think trust is sort of built in very small moments. It's not necessarily something big. It might be, you know, you're tracking back, even though it's not your player or you're not the one who lost the ball. It might be that, you know, you're willing to stay afterwards to help somebody work on shooting. There's just so many ways that you can kind of build trust with other people in a team setting. And there's also ways you can lose it. You know, if you are not engaged day after day, if you are somebody who is kind of a taker and not a giver, that's a tough attitude to have on a team. But I think that a team actually teaches you how to trust.
As you see the trust become stronger, do you see better playing on the field?
Yeah, I think it's hard to not see better results when you see a team that really trusts one another, because there's a lot less anxiety. There's a lot less worry about, is this person going to do their job? And I think that's a big thing. Like if you can be reliable in order to do your job, then everyone else has the freedom to do their job. And I think if you trust yourself, which is another part of trust that we haven't really talked about, like it allows you to play full speed. And that's big, because I think when you don't trust yourself, you're second guessing everything you do. And you're trying to decide, you know, in your own mind, like, was this the right thing? And if you just like let yourself go to, you know, if you're going to do it, you're going to go full speed. And maybe sometimes you're going to make decisions that are not the right decisions, or maybe you're not going to execute to the best of your ability. But what really matters is how you respond to that, not so much how it happens.
How can we help a player have stronger self-trust?
You know, I think one of the best ways is if you're describing an issue to me or a problem, and I ask you, like, if it was your best friend saying that same problem, what advice would you give them? Because people usually have really good advice for themselves. The question is whether they're willing to take it. And then I think the question I would ask is, if you're not willing to take your own advice, why would anyone else take your advice? And so getting them to see that they really have the answers inside of them, it's just a matter of accessing them.
Going back to your teen and college years a little bit, did you start to find yourself coaching or leading other players?
Well, you know, living across the street from the soccer field was interesting because anytime anybody wanted to do any extra practice, I could see them right outside my front window. And it was like great because I could just run across the street and get in extra work with them. And so then it turned into where my club coaches would say, hey, why don't you go see Becky and she can do a little extra shooting with you or something, because that was so convenient for me and I love doing it. So it was sort of a little joke on our team, like even as young as 10, 11, and 12, that if you wanted extra, go find me. And it was just convenient. I had soccer balls. I lived across the street, and it sort of turned into a role that I really embraced on our team.
When did you decide you wanted to coach professionally and continue to do that?
I think I really sort of crystallized the plan in my mind in college, but I knew before that that's what I wanted to do, but I had just never really seen anyone that had made that into a career. So I thought, when I went to college, I thought, okay, well, I'll become a teacher, because a lot of teachers coach, in high school or middle school part-time. And so I thought that would be like a viable career path to to teach first and then coach. So that's sort of the route I went. And then I was, really fortunate early in my career to become a full-time coach.
How did you convince others that coaching was a career pathway when you did start?
that was the big trick. I think my parents, once they saw my passion around it, they supported it. And, we used to joke, because my dad always used to say, soccer's not going to pay the bills. And he's like, you got to focus on your academics, because soccer's not going to pay the bills. And so I think I proved to my dad, especially, that I could manage both. I could be very, academically oriented and still put a lot of time and energy into soccer. And like I said, I think that first coaching job at Barry, once they were there and actually saw what I was doing, I think it changed their mind. I don't think they had an idea of what a full-time coach was, because, they hadn't played sports as young people, and they didn't know. No one in my family had even been to college before. So it was just a very unique experience for all of us as a family.
Who were some of your mentors when you started your coaching journey?
Well, I was really fortunate, especially around in my generation, like there weren't a lot of female coaches, and my high school coach was a woman. It was the mom of one of our players, and she was instrumental in me, getting to college. She really helped that process along. Even before that, I had a husband and wife who coached me. And so like having these women coaches, I sort of took it for granted at the time, because I didn't really know any better. But then, you go along and you find out like that some people have never played for a female coach in their entire career. And then when I got to college, my college coach, he was a huge mentor for me, because he was the first full-time coach I had seen. He really gave me opportunity that allowed me to get into coaching at a very early age. I think he sort of gave me a head start on my career.
How do you use your role to help encourage a woman to start coaching?
Yeah, I've really tried to make a point of creating positions around our team that can be entry-level spots for women. Most of our equipment managers at Florida are aspiring coaches. Our director of ops position has gone to aspiring coaches. And there's some people who don't want to do that, because it's a very specific role that doesn't really allow much coaching, but sometimes it's just being around the environment and seeing what you can be is really important. I felt that very much so in my career. And so for me, that would be my first priority, is to try to create opportunities for women to get into entry-level positions. And then hopefully, as they continue to progress, like pushing them forward into full-time roles where they can really succeed.
I know you do spend a lot of time helping other coaches. How has this become important work to you?
Yeah, I don't even know how long ago now, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, I went to the NCAA Coaches Academy, and, the thing they challenged us in that academy was, how much are you giving back? And at that point in my career, if I had to think about it, I didn't really feel like it was that much. And I think that awareness sort of led me down a path of like, how could I be doing more? And, I think if it was not for that experience, I might not have gone in that direction. And I'm so glad that I got pushed in that, because it really changed my life in terms of the value of giving back.
I know you've talked about coaching the person and not just the soccer and X's and O's. Did you always see this as being important?
I think in some ways I always saw it as being important, but it probably wasn't until I connected with Brett Ledbetter, who I work with in What Drives Winning, that I really saw a way to make that like structurally a part of my program and systematically a part of my program. So that to me, it's like we think about, our identity is so wrapped up as an athlete. Like I think a lot of athletes have that issue. And I think looking at soccer as something we do, not who we are, is a huge step in being able to separate the person from the player and making sure that you're attending to both sides of you. I want our players to be very dedicated in what they're doing, but I also want them to be, fully functioning human beings and not just 100% in their sport only.
So going off of being fully functioning human beings, do you do any classes or teach them anything that they can use after college?
Yeah, we have a thing called Real World Wednesdays or Real World Weekly, depending on what day it falls on, where we ask our team about like what topics they're interested in. And we sort of do a little survey at the beginning of the semester. And then we try to put together some programming that addresses that. So it might be about finances or etiquette or, some of them last year asked for like a basic nonpartisan primer on politics. This year we've made a huge issue to have everyone registered to vote. So I just think things like that bring up issues. I mean, obviously we've been talking about social justice in this last quarter. I think that anything that's going to be relevant and affecting our team, I would like for us to be having a discussion about.
What are some of your favorite memories from teaching any players on those Wednesdays?
I thought it was really fun the day we did changing a tire and changing oil on a car, and then basic scooter maintenance because a lot of our players drive scooters, and it was just fun, like seeing people who have probably never even opened the hood of their car before, like get into the idea that they could actually fix their car in some way. It was kind of empowering to see.
How do you identify the characteristics of good people that you do want to be a part of your program?
Well, I think it's part of it is just being clear on your own core values as a team. We talk about ours being courage, growth, and team first. And how do people, embody that? And people are going to embody that in different ways, but like looking for situations where you can really see it come out. So for example, I really love to go watch players play when they're not winning. Unfortunately, like a lot of our players are on good teams, so the opportunity to find them when they're not winning isn't as easy as you would think. But I think when you face adversity, your true colors really come out. And so trying to find ways to see what that looks like, or engaging them in hard conversations, seeing where they really stand in terms of how they handle that is important to us.
So you had mentioned the 3 core values. Do these change every year? Is it something that you've done your whole coaching journey?
No, they don't change every year. I think we've gotten more clear over the course of time. I think the hardest part about core values is finding actionable ways to embody them, because it's one thing to just have words. It's another thing to actually do something about it. So like for us, courage is a really good one because the way that we play takes a lot of courage. We're going to really rely on everyone on our team to be able to have a certain level of technical and tactical ability to, build out of the back and do some things that are scary. Like it's really easy to clear a ball that's, at the top of your 18. It's a lot harder to play out of pressure. And I think for us, like developing the player for the next level is important. And so we understand that that's a skill that's going to have to evolve. But then courage could also come in different ways too. Like, are you willing to have, a fierce conversation with someone outside of the field that needs to occur? And how does that happen? Do you have the tools? Are you equipped to have that conversation?
So how do you help develop your players into better leaders?
That's a hard question because I feel like a lot of people focus on like captains or leadership councils, and we have a version of that, but like I feel like I've really gone away from that top-down approach to leadership and really looked more at how can you tie leadership to moments, meaning when we're doing something, whether it's we're training or whether we're traveling or whatever it is, like someone is always doing it right. And can we highlight that as opposed to just always, looking at the things that aren't going well? And I think when you can, like, it's like if you were watching video and you were only watching your mistakes all the time. So all you've gotten good at is identifying your mistakes and maybe having that image burned into your brain. But if you are looking also at things that you did really well, I think that helps you visualize what it is you're trying to do. So like when we show clips, we are trying to go like 70-30, the right thing. And there's obviously a point that you have to show some of the things that broke down, but I think it's like, what do you want to reinforce?
So going off recordings a little bit, I really love the bench cam idea. Could you explain this and maybe some of the big takeaways from this?
Yeah, we've actually even evolved that a little bit this year. We're trying to. The bench cam is just a camera that films the bench, including the coaches. So it kind of provides a little bit of accountability for like how you're acting when you're not in the game. And there's good parts of that and bad parts of that, because if I see a player who's really cheering hard for a person in their position, like I would like to highlight that. But at the same time, if I see somebody who's disengaged or pouting because they're not playing, I don't think that's the message they want to send. And it's easier to show them what that looks like than to try and say, hey, I don't think you're engaged. Like I just can show them that video and say, like, what do you see when you watch this? And then the way that we've tried to evolve it is we're trying to create these clips that are like our identity as a team. So what does that look like? What is our identity when we're not winning? What is our identity when something great has just happened? How could we find ways to highlight those things and get our players to replicate those as much as possible?
Now, this doesn't always just watch the players. It also watches the coaches. And how has this changed you as a coach?
I try. I'm not always successful, but I try to not like ride the wave of emotion that a game provides you. I try to think about what does the game need from me at this moment. And sometimes that's not what I feel. And so I think the bench cam gives you good feedback on how you're able to do that.
Is it important that the players know that you as a coach are in the camera too? Does that affect them in any way?
Well, I think it's just accountability for all of us. So for me, it's like, it's not just a one-way street where we're talking about the players' behavior. It also comes down to talking about our behavior.
How did this affect the players when watching themselves as well?
Well, we don't necessarily sit and watch, hours of bench cam film. I think it's really just finding clips that illustrate the things that we want. And if it's something that's negative, generally I'm showing that to the individual, not to the team. And I think it's just an awareness tool. It's just an awareness tool. It's like, I don't know if you've ever re-listened to a podcast that you've done. Like nobody really likes listening to themselves, but like you can really learn a lot from doing that.
As well as the bench cam, some of your expressions and phrases have really taken off too. I know my high school coach in Iowa uses both Go Green and Together. So what does it mean to know that your work inspires programs well beyond your own?
Well, it's flattering for sure. I think that when I was a player growing up, there weren't nearly as many resources to look to in terms of how to develop as both a player and as a coach and as a person. And so I think if I can help provide those resources to someone else, that would just be a way of me helping someone get ahead of where I was at that point.
How are you able to develop some of these ideas and concepts?
I mean, some of it just happens organically. Like it's, it might be something that is triggered by an event that occurs. Some of it might be, taking inspiration from someone else. I think a lot of coaching ideas are not necessarily original, but they're putting your own spin on them.
So I've heard you talk about both about touch and using objects like wristbands. How important is it that that object is tangible and able to be seen everywhere?
Yeah, well, the touch one is such a tough one right now because of COVID. I think touch is really important, but it's also like a little bit discouraged right now. It was really weird after our game the other day that, the refs were like, no, you guys don't shake hands. I'm like, really? Like, that just seems so strange. But, even giving high fives or energy touches to each other in practice, it's just a gray area at this point. Even like being in a meeting, a team meeting where like team meetings often have like an intimacy about them. And when you're socially distanced, you totally lose that. So then, I think it does come down to, can you create something out of an object that maybe allows people to see the point more clearly and have something tangible to actually go back to after the fact.
Through these COVID times, how can we support players in social distancing, wearing masks, or maybe not being able to go to school?
Yeah, this is a really tough time. I mean, I think we can't underestimate the difficulty that people are having in terms of, there's no real social outlet for people right now, especially college kids. Getting in groups is what they normally do for social, and that can't really happen at the moment. I think it's a lot harder than people realize. And then, the social unrest that's going on is creating a lot of angst. I mean, the election's coming up, which polarizes both sides. I mean, there's really a lot going on right now. And for me, like as a coach, it's important to pay attention to how people are feeling. And that's hard when you have a large group, but I think it's really necessary with what's happening.
How have you seen the team support each other during these COVID times?
Well, like I said, a really clear example was when Cam's father had COVID, seeing people come together with that. I think it's like trying to create opportunities for our team to be together in a healthy and safe way. One of the things we have hopefully coming up soon is a big tie-dye party. So we can do that socially distant, but it's fun. And I guess tie-dye is back in the COVID era because everyone had to stay at home and they had to find something to do. We've talked for a month now about trying to do like an outdoor movie night, but we've been waiting for the weather to get a little cooler, which finally today I can actually wear a hoodie. So like, that's exciting. But just trying to find ways to bring people together in a way that's not problematic because of social distancing.
So how do you come up with some of these team bonding activities and exercises, and even before COVID?
Probably a lot of looking at other people and seeing what they're doing and borrowing ideas from people. A lot of it from, trying to get a feel for what our team is interested in and what they would like to do. Tie-dye socks are a big thing on our team right now for some reason. And so, like finding ways to tap into something that they're already excited about.
So when introducing some of your ideas for team bonding exercises, do some of the players get like a little defensive or worry about what you're thinking?
Well, you're not going to please everybody, that's for sure. And so, I'm sure there's some people on our team who, if we were like, hey, it's a mandatory team tie-dye party, they'd probably like roll their eyes and be like, I hate tie-dye. And that's fine. Like, it's not for everybody. And the same for most things. And I think a lot of times as a coach, really all you're doing is planting seeds, and you never know when those are going to grow. It could be a year from now. It could be never. It could be 5 years from now. And for some people, they're going to get it right away, but you can't really be discouraged just because your message doesn't resonate with every single person.
So I was watching a video that you had said something along the lines of not making a player do something you would not do. How important is this leadership style?
Well, I think modeling is something that really goes underutilized or underestimated the power of. If I'm asking my team to be something, let's say poised, then I have to be poised. And if I'm not, like for example, if I'm telling my team like, we don't argue with the refs, but then I am, all over the refs every second of the game, like that's a little bit of a mixed message. And so I'm thinking about how can I make sure that I don't send mixed signals as a coach.
So talking about team culture, how have you seen the team culture increase through your years coaching this team?
I feel like people realize team culture more after they've left than when they're in the environment, because then they have something to compare it to. And I think what I would hope is that any of our players who leave our environment would then go on to be, like kind of a beacon in their own next environment. And if they do that, then I think we would consider it a success.
How does team culture and belonging affect a performance?
I think the belonging piece is really important, because if you don't really feel safe in your environment, it's really hard to be yourself. And I think the best performances come out when people are thoroughly authentic.
So we haven't talked about belonging much today. Can you explain how that affects your team and what you do to implement it?
Yeah, it's hard. I think when you're trying to integrate a group, we found that this year, because at the beginning of when we first came back for preseason, because of the social distancing rules, like you could only train with who you lived with. Well, by nature, our older players live with each other, the younger players live with each other. So that was really challenging to find ways to integrate those groups, because they couldn't get it through training. And so it was such a relief when we actually started preseason, where we could all train together, because seriously, like it felt like there were people who didn't know anything about their teammates at that point. And so, trying different ways, like we had a big capture the flag night on campus where we mixed the teams once we were allowed to do that. And it was outside. It was a big area, so we were pretty distant from each other, but like trying to find different ways to create environments that allow people to mix with people that they wouldn't normally mix with, like their roommates.
How do you encourage your players to take what they learned during their time in your program into their future careers?
I think some of that's a little bit natural. And I think some, again, like they may not even see how that happens until they leave the environment. Our players joke all the time, like when they go into the corporate world or their business world or whatever they're doing, they're like, we are so mad when people are not on time. Like, what's up with that? Because, like being on time is big for us. And it's like, they don't understand why people aren't on time. Like they can't even fathom, like, how could someone work and not be on time? And so I think it's, again, like when you're in that environment all the time, it's like a fish in water. You don't even notice it. But when you get out of that environment and you see that there's differences, that's when people really tend to become leaders in their own environment.
So I have one final question, which is a question I ask every guest. What do you hope people remember about your impact to soccer and the world?
Ooh, that's a big one to end with. I think for soccer, soccer just happens to be like a vehicle through which you can make your influence. Like soccer is what gives you a platform, like as a player, as a coach, whatever. I think the bigger question is like, how do you use that platform? And I'm glad soccer was the sport that picked me, because I feel like that's what happened more than I picked it. But I also feel like when I'm done coaching, that people will look at the situation that we had at Florida, and like it's not a sacrifice to compete at the highest level and try to do things in a way that develops the person. Because I think sometimes people think that's it's an either or, but I don't think it's an either or. I think, matter of fact, really promoting the person and getting people to like really have a lot of self-awareness helps them then become a better player.
I could probably have gone on with Becky for much longer. Between her years in coaching and passion for the sport, she has so much to offer. I really appreciated her sharing a bit more about culture and its impact on performance. There are many things that I was able to take away from today. I think this will help me to be a better coach, a better player, but most important, a better person. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and until next time, remember to keep the game beautiful.